Geek. Hello, great ones. This is part one of a conversation I had with a group of Black professionals who consist of therapists, coaches, and parents against corporal punishment. Stay tuned for part two. I want to start off with my story. My name is Latonya Sampson-McDonald. I'm a life coach. I am also an associate marriage and family therapist. And this topic about spanking your kids, hitting your kids, whatever you want to call it, is important to me because I feel like it is a negative stereotype and trope that especially my community, the Black community, holds on to it nearly and dearly. And I'm coming from the basis of generational trauma. A lot of things that we hold on to further oppresses our race. Black people have to fight multiple wars. Not only do we have to deal with regular mental illness, but we have to be Black on top of that. We have to deal with racial trauma and generational trauma. And there was a post that I made on Facebook and it said, "Stop hitting your kids because it is white supremacy to slave mentality and your bloodline has been traumatized enough." And a lot of people, like, the conversation was, oh, spare the rod, spoil the child. Oh, I'm hitting my kids regardless. Some kids need to get hit, whatever the case may be. But most of the conversation negated the fact that I stated that your bloodline has been traumatized enough. And what I mean by that is that we've already paid the price. Your ancestors have already paid the price. And there's no need, when you decide to have a Black child, you're deciding to enlist them in a war that they didn't sign up for when it comes to racism and injustices. We're constantly watching this generation. They talk about, oh, this generation has it easy. We're constantly watching Black bodies get discarded and tossed and becoming a hashtag. So when I say your bloodline has already paid the price, this should no longer be a thing to where they got to fight the world and come home and fight as well. Okay, so I'm going to ask my wonderful Black professionals to chime in on this topic. Whoever wants to go first, go ahead. Feel free. Anybody?
I'll go next.
Thank you, Denise.
My name is Denise. I live in Chesapeake, Virginia, and are you in the Hampton Roads? Oh, where are you? Oh no.
I'm in Virginia. I'm in Richmond.
Oh, okay. So when I saw your post, I was like, yes, somebody gets it, because I grew up. What my godparents raised me. And so I grew up in a house where, corporal punishment was done. I was too scared. I got spanked 2 times in my life and was like, I'm not getting spanked no more. But I used to like cry when my brother would get spanked, because it was just like it was like he was getting like, beat to me, and I used to hear him crying, and it just did something to me. And he was a pain in the butt, but he didn't, he had issues, but it wasn't, like that. He was adopted. His mom, to my knowledge, is still in a mental hospital in DC. He is deceased. And so she was walking down the street with him upside down. So from birth, he had, like trauma, and then he was adopted. So he had a lot of mental health issues. But anyway, so I got spanked those 2 times, and that was it. And I was always like, I never really was like just for it. In my family, we had a like a round table with my nieces and their significant others, and this topic came up, and it was like a serious debate, and I was going off because I was like, no, it's not right. And it was amazing to me how adamant some of my niece's significant others were about spanking. And you could tell it was more about control and being able to control their child. And one of them, he didn't even have a child at the time. And it was just like, you could just tell it was about control. And so, I was quote unquote white for that. And so I'm like, I'm not white. And they're like, oh, you a social worker? It was just, I don't know. I will never forget that night. And they still tease me about that to this day. And I said, and I remember them saying, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'll put Sakaya in timeout. And so my niece even gave me a chair one year for her birthday for Sakaya's timeout chair. That was her timeout chair. And so it was kind of like a joke, but it was like, I'm not going to spank my child. And so I really didn't. I think I like tapped her hand, like maybe like probably twice. And she's 19 to this day. And I couldn't ask for a better, child. But I'm passionate about this topic because I work in an outpatient, I work for the Children's Hospital here, but I do outpatient therapy. And so there's two clinicians of color. One person just got hired probably like a month ago. And prior to that, I started in October and there were no clinicians of color. And so it was all Caucasian. And that because in our, our culture, it's like no big deal to spank your child. But as soon as you say that, we got to call CPS. It's like that's how it's regarded. And so, it's like what I tell parents is that you're opening up a can of worms when you are doing this, and a child may say something, and next thing you know, CPS is knocking on your door. 9 times out of 10, the case is closed or whatever, but still, it can affect your life in ways that you don't even realize. And I actually had 2 families in DC, and these were both single moms. And I was working in child welfare. They were 2 single moms, and both of them, their child was removed. 2 sons, child was removed because one mom spanked her son with a belt and marks, and he was dark skinned. But luckily he went to live with her aunt. This other child was removed because mom spanked him, was Mark's, and he went to a very, good foster home. And, these moms were stressed out, and they said they were stressed out and they felt terrible about what they did. And I really had a conversation with them. I said, basically, you don't want to spank your children. Now, the key for them was that they didn't realize that. So one mom was a preschool teacher going to school for early childhood education. The other mom was a security guard at the museum, which is, I believe, a federal job. They do background checks with both of these jobs. So your name is now in the registry, which this can now affect your job, you being able to provide for your children. And, they did not realize all of this. And the one mom she was in school to become an early child education teacher. And she was just like, oh my gosh, like if I go somewhere else and work and they do a background check, my name's going to be in the registry. And I said, yeah, it will. And she's like, I'm going to have to think of a different career, da, da, da. But the whole thing was they both got their children back. I mean, the one mom who was studying education, I mean, her whole life turned around because of this for the better. And I still, I ran into her at church years later. And her son is older, graduated from high school. I mean, it was good to see him, but it was just like, and she always says to me, she's like, always like, thank you so much. I mean, she got him back and her life became better because of an incident that, her child got removed, but she got him back. But she really changed her parenting because of this and just didn't realize that she was under stress. And the other mom got her child back, and it was like the same type of situation. That I will always remember those 2 moms because they were stressed. And that's what I was saying to them. Like, when you're stressed, the worst thing you can do is hit your child. because if you leave marks, that's it, and so they got removed. And but it worked for their best in the end. Luckily, the boys did not have a bad experience in foster care. They were okay. One was with family. But anyway, so I'm passionate about this because I still see it in what I do every day. And then working in private practice in the evening, having adults who have been traumatized. And a lot of times it's because of family trauma. And it includes spanking and being beat and verbally abused. And we just have to do better. We just have to do better and speak out, because I see it with the kids in the daytime, and then I see it with the adults, and I hear it, and I'm like to hear the kids and then go to the adults, it just does something to me. Because I'm like, gosh, this could be so and so, that I have during the daytime that's now a child. And here's this adult who's still struggling with their childhood trauma. And it's a good topic. That's why I responded. I was like, we need to start a movement for real, because they'll call you white in a second as soon as you speak out against it. But it's not about being white. It's about, when I taught parenting classes, I don't know if you all remember the Relisha Lurry, the girl who was, they think the janitor took her, did something, maybe, killed her, don't know. It was in DC at the family shelter. I was actually doing parenting classes at that time there, and her mother was in my class. And so this shelter was like the family shelter in DC, and it was wild, and it was just a lot going on. And so I was teaching a parenting class, and, of course, the issue of spanking came up. And these were moms, a lot of times single moms with multiple children. They were stressed. And I just broke it down to them, because I said, do you want to get hit when you do something wrong? I said, if I go to work and I make a mistake, I don't want my boss to hit me because I made a mistake. I said, discipline means to teach. So what are you teaching your child when you hit them? I said, you don't want your significant other to hit you. I'm like, some of you are here because of that. So why is it okay to hit your child? And so a lot of them stopped thinking. They stopped, because I think breaking it down to them like that, because it's hitting, you're hitting. That's like if it's just, that's what it is. And I don't see it any differently. And I'm just passionate about that. And I was just like, no, you're hitting your child because they did something wrong. So what are you really teaching them? You're teaching them to be scared of you. And yeah, people will say, oh, well, I was spanked and I grew up okay. Okay, that's your story. But there's a whole lot of other people, if you really think about it, how did you feel when you got spanked as a child? And so it's a lot, but that's all I have to say. I could talk.
Most of the people who say that they were spanked and grew up and are fine, are they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Are they really? Think about everybody who goes, "Oh well, I was whooped as a child. I got my behind tore up as a child, and ain't nothing wrong with me. I'm fine." And you really think about it, and it's like, are you okay? Like, like, did you hear yourself? Like you not okay though. Like you got like a lot of mental health issues. Like you have a lot of unresolved childhood trauma. You got a lot of kind of emotional baggage that you're dealing with. You're not fine.
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say, and first of all, thank you, Tanya, for putting this platform together to bring us, um, and I hope it expands further into a situation, not to the point where we're just preaching to the choir, but more so get more of an audience of people who, so gung ho about it, and not really to change their mind, but just just to see the alternative. So for me
Wait,
personally,
let me pause you. Vincent, can you turn your camera on, please?
I can't turn my camera on right now because I'm looking all jacked up. It's
No,
9 o'clock. I'm actually
where you at? We
I'm
need you. We
actually
need to see your face.
Okay, I'm gonna talk for a little bit, and then throw on something and straighten up. I ain't had no haircut.
Oh, please.
I don't know. It's
This
just,
a pandemic. You good. You good.
oh
If
man.
somebody ain't had no haircut, is sitting there still whooping their child right now. So they need to see you.
What?
Let me tell you what.
Yeah, nah, I'm gonna turn my camera on, but I just wanted to say, thank you for putting this together, and all the platforms you've done it on. So, I commend you for that, for stepping up. And then two, I just think that our people, we just, it's like with anything, whether you want to talk about hazing with fraternities and sororities, and I can say that because I'm part of a fraternity, Phi Beta Sigma fraternity. So whether you're talking about hazing, whether you're talking about whooping your kids, whether you're talking about gangs, Crips, Bloods, or whatever, Black folk, we always feel the need to have a badge of honor, or wear our badge of honor rooted in violence, right? And so that's something where that was taught to us by our white slave masters. And so when I mention this to people, and they so gone eating their kids, I'm like, well, what makes you any different than a slave master who beat us, who beat our forefathers and our foremothers? So what makes you any different? And so when they stop and think about it, but see, the problem is that we're not taught any other type of alternative. Like we're in a system of white supremacy. It's very fast paced in America. We're constantly on the go. We have mental health issues. We have physical issues. We have to confront racism. We have to confront also sexism, that intersection if you're a Black woman. Then if you're a Black woman, you're raising kids as a single mother, that's even more so. And shout out to the single fathers also out there. But the point is that, it's, there's a stressor there with your child, and you want to take the shortcut route because that's what you've seen your parents do. And their parents seen themselves do that. And it just goes back to the white man. So basically what I'm saying here is that, having these conversations, and really we need to go from conversations to seminars to full blown, like I said, I've quoted Stacey Patton. That's kind of my mentor. I'm in the academic field. I teach at University of Florida. And Stacey Patton, she wrote a book on the concept of spare the rod, and also she wrote an article. You all remember that Baltimore mom a couple of years ago, how she was all on the TV and hailed as the mom of the year, this or that. And, that's the system of white supremacy bigging up. Yeah, this is the mom of the year. Because why? Why is she the mom of the year? Because she emasculated a Black boy, almost a Black man on TV, her own flesh and blood, and beating him, just like if the cops was as the cops were beating, George Floyd to death. So, so that's the thing that we don't really stop and think about, because we're just so used to doing and just following the blueprint that was set before us. A lot of it is rooted in religion. I have to say that, unfortunately, or at least the misinterpretation of religion, because Jesus put children on a pedestal. To be honest, Jesus didn't preach about beating kids. I often challenge people. I say, well, where in the Bible did Jesus talk about beating your children? And then then the first thing they say, oh, spare the rod. Well, first of all, spare the rod. That was rude. That was a English playwright who wrote that. It doesn't say spare the rod in the Bible. There's different interpretations of the Bible, first and foremost. And second of all, if you're looking at that specific verse, all they're saying is that you use the rod of correction to steer that sheep back into line, right? So that doesn't mean I beat the sheep to death. If I beat a sheep, they're gonna die. You see what I'm saying? The rod had a crook in it, so you can steer. So if the sheep fell into the valley, you could pick that sheep up and put them right back into the line. You didn't. The shepherd didn't beat sheep. You see. And so when you try to break that down, the pastor said, well, okay, then that's a whole nother issue. You're going by what the pastor said, not particularly what the word is really saying here. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Just kind of kick things off. I could ramble too, but just want to say thank you, and I'm gonna go ahead and listen to the commentary.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vincent. I just want everybody to get a chance to speak, and we can still have more of a conversation once everybody um, has a chance to speak, because you know how we do. You may hear somebody say something and have a response to it, and that's what the dynamic that I want. I want a real dynamic when it comes to us having this conversation. Something I did want to touch on before I forget. When Denise mentioned that we're quick to be called white or whatever the case may be, me and those who have worked in the black spaces and the white spaces with clients, from my own personal experience, white people have more child abuse cases than any other race. So for people to say that, oh, this is Billy shot up the school because he wasn't getting whooped, or Billy killed his parents, or whatever the case may be, there is a backstory. Okay, I worked with it every single day. There is a backstory. There's always a reason for the behavior, and when you don't think that there's a reason for the behavior, that's the stuff that is kind of really playing a real role in killing black people, because everybody is looking at Dylan Roof. Oh, he got mental illness, but these Crips and Bloods, y'all don't think they have mental illness and depression. The kids over there shooting up people in Chirac, y'all don't think something mentally is going on with them. You just think they're bad people, or they're just lazy, or they don't have nothing to live for. That's not the case. Every single behavior has a cause to the behavior. And if you think that white people don't hit their kids just because you see them screaming out in public and you don't see them swatting them right then, they're smart. They know I can't hit you in public because the police will be at my house. And I've dealt with it where I had to make calls to white families, make CPS calls, and the officers show up and be like, good job, period. Like, the cases don't, like, case dropped. They look out for each other when it comes to that. So that is one of the things that I feel like is plaguing our community. And if you want to use this story as an example, please do. Every time they try to say, oh, you sound white, that's what they want us to believe, so that we can continue to oppress our children, not only outside, but inside of our own homes. So I
That's
just had
what
to touch on that real
I
quick.
always get confused about too. Is like, why would black people get called white for not wanting to physically discipline their children when corporal punishment was brought onto us by white people when we got brought over here from slavery anyway? Like, that's where
So
we learned it from in the first place. So you're calling us white when we want to stop doing something that was taught to us by white people in the first place. Like, that's where the miseducation comes from in that aspect. And that's where we have to go back and reteach people that it's like, no, 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 I'm going to break the cycle here, because the real history is that um that corporal punishment that does come from white people, and I'm trying to let you know I'm stopping that, and I'm taking back my own heritage as a black person and saying that I'm not doing that because that was brought on to me by white people. And that's what we have to start straightening out.
One of our main
so
issues,
much of it. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, one of our main issues that so much of the culture that we now claim to be ours has nothing to do with us. Our culture
Mm-hmm.
and who we are was
Mm-hmm.
taken from us, stripped, and then swapped.
Yes.
So look at it now as the negative behaviors, or that which is looked at as negative in society in regards to black behavior, actually did not start off as black behavior. That was white behavior prior. So we switched we basically changed places. We taught them how to live, how to thrive, how to do, and how to be better. And in that process, we ended up getting their bad habits and traits. And through slavery and so many other different channels, now it's trickled down in that format. So we're running around here trying to beat our children every time we get angry or we get upset, not understanding that it's coming from a place of rage, it's coming from a place of chaos, it's coming from a place of a lack of control that you feel within yourself, that you're now trying to gain through violence in taking over your environment. You see what I mean? There's a lot of training, including military training, which teaches you to, in law enforcement, which teaches you to take control of your environment through violence and through force, and with such overwhelming force that whoever you're dealing with would not think about trying to do anything to combat that or go against it again, for the fact that they're just overwhelmingly being obliterated. This is the same thing that we basically do with our kids. We call it putting the fear of God into them, or, making sure we keep them on the right path. But the thing about it is, what you're showing more than anything is, when you don't know how to handle a situation and you lack the self-control yourself to be able to work it out, then you can lash out physically and feel better. That's some of the main of what they're being taught. And then you got people like me who, I'm a life coach, by the way, professionally certified life coach and mediator, and among other things. But I'm also a triple diagnosis as a Black man. I have PTSD, OCD, and DID. Um, for several reasons, but one of which is I would literally just get whooped to the point of somebody got to be tired or I'm about to pass up. I ran away, and they told me that the only reason they didn't lock my mother up is because my wounds weren't the more scars. You know what I mean? Other than that, they said my mom would have been locked up for a good amount of time, and it's not just the psychological, mental, and emotional effect on the individual themselves in regards to what we view as negative, and the simple things, or they're going to be more violent. There's other things that go along with that, like starting to like pain and starting to appreciate things that you shouldn't be experiencing as a child, let alone an adult. So now you have children who have been whipped to the point that they understand, or the way their mind thinks is, okay, I'm either going to have to like this, I'm going to have to learn to love this and use it, or they're going to kill me. It's a form of torture. So for me, I shifted gears and I learned to start to enjoy the pain. And then after a while, I started to really like it and use it myself, on myself, to the point that my parents realized that there was no point in whipping me, because I just straight up told my mom, go ahead, I got a date. I got stuff to do. I brought her like 6 or 7 belts on a hanger, was like, go for it. There's not very much you can do for me. Like, I kind of like the thin one if you want to try that one. And she just looked at me and was like, go to your room. So then you reach a point where you create a monster, you create a form of being, as to where regular punishment just doesn't even work. And then, because you haven't used any of your mental stamina or any of your other tools to try to work on this problem, now you got a child that you have no idea what to deal with, and they become adults that you have no idea what to deal with. You see what I mean? So there's a lot of different sides to this. It's not just black or white, or just simply the mental or physical. There are so many layers to this onion that, I mean, 100%, there's just no reason. If you can't do anything else other than hit your kids, then either you don't need to have kids or you don't need to be around them. Plain and simple. Because that means you don't have control over yourself. And there's something happened to you that made you that way. It may not be your fault, but if you don't do something about it, you don't take care of it, you don't educate yourself, it will be your fault when your child's in the casket. And that's the difference. And I've known people, and I've known children that have died for that reason, because mom or dad came home and had too much on their mind, too stressed out, too angry to be able to deal with the baby. But they had all the time in the world to deal with their overseer at work and supervisors and everything else that they wouldn't talk, cuss, or raise a hand to. but they have no problem beating their child to death. So, but yeah, just a little something, something for your mind. My name is Christopher McDonald, and once again, I'm a life coach and just here to support you guys and show a lot of love. I appreciate everybody who's here.
Thank you. Atasha, you had wanted to chime in. I saw you trying to chime in earlier.
I did. One of the things to kind of flesh out that continuing conversation that sometimes our people are critical of when we say, I'm not going to spank my children or do whatever, and they, call us white, is also really rooted in, we have gotten this belief that only white children talk back to their white parents. And so because of that, they talk back because they don't get spanking or whipped or beaten or whatever. And so, a lot of times we really attribute it to that, so when you see a white child speaking back or talking back, they go, see, that's because they don't get beat. So my child knows not to do that because of the following. And that may be true that your child doesn't speak back or talk back. But it also could be true that your child has no opinion. And it also could be true that your child may grow up and really struggle with communication because, one of the first messages that we teach them is that when I'm upset with you, I need to cause pain and I need to hit you, not talk to you, right? And the notion of beating my child and then telling them why I beat them, right? Doesn't send the message that I think so many parents and so many generations have thought that it sent. I think there's been a thought that if I beat you and then I tell you, well, this is why I beat you because you did the following, that child's going to correlate that with, well, I don't want to feel this pain again, so I'm not going to do this behavior again. That's not the message that it sends, right? So what it's really sent as that child is, my parents got mad and they beat me. And then when they calm down, they talk to me. And so the challenge with that and the fear with that generationally really becomes, well, now we have another generation and another generation and another generation that thinks my first course of action is aggression and violence, and then to talk later, right? And as adults, look at how many people we meet who, you think to yourself, we are fill in the blank age. There's no reason that we cannot have a communication, have a conversation, right? Or we can have a difference of opinion, or I can give you maybe my thoughts or my feelings in relationship to you and I, and that shouldn't necessarily cause you to shut down because you feel yourself getting so angry. You feel yourself getting so angry because you never understood any feeling other than anger. So anger is familiar, right? And so then, we look up and this person is 40 and can't have, genuine friendships and relationships. And they looking around like, well, this is just me. But a part of what's just you is that unfortunately you have never learned how to communicate. You have learned how to hit, but you've never learned how to communicate. And so that's very difficult when, we always talk about building Black families and Black communities. One of our challenges with doing that is there's got to be a person who's willing to get that out in relationship with you, right? It's got to be a person who's willing to say, you just gonna get mad sometimes and not talk to me, or you gonna get mad sometimes because I'm trying to have a conversation with you and I'm supposed to tough that out. Then that becomes the next challenge, right? In that we've conditioned ourselves as Black people to think that life is meant to be survived and not lived. And so we just believe that we're just simply supposed to survive life. And that's just not true. And so we almost treat it as a badge of honor because we're in survival mode 24/7, because we've never learned or allowed ourselves to feel anything else. We literally at times subconsciously equate living well or living peacefully with being white. And when you think about that, it's just sad for our people that, that's just, we have really made living well, being happy, whatever it may be, with being white. that message has been sent that Black people aren't supposed to live well. That's not true. Black people aren't supposed to have a good life. That's not true. And you know, your child isn't supposed to do these things. Your child shouldn't be able to tell you that they don't necessarily want to do this activity. They're going to do it because you said they're going to do it, but that's not true. Because then in 30, 40 years, you're trying to figure out how come my child, you know, can't do the following, because it started because you wanted them to survive instead of live. And I think that's just been just one of the generational curses and traumas that have just really, really impacted our people for a long time.
Because think about how many young Black boys that genuinely jump to anger and aggression but can't talk to you. That when they get upset, they, instead of being able to like tell you somebody hurt my feelings, or I got frustrated, or I don't understand something, what they immediately do is they're like, and they want to fight. They want to fight.
Right.
They want to hit something. They want to break something. They want to hurt something, because what it goes back to what you said. We're taught to don't talk back.
Yeah.
And whoopings. Mm-hmm. So what part of that helps them with communication skills and appropriate interaction?
Right. Because, and then you think about
exactly, when do they learn that? Where do,
right.
how do they get that when they get older? When
Absolutely.
do they learn that in the transition of becoming adult? Where do they learn that emotional growth and wellness to the transition to a point?
Kima, I'm going to tell you where they end up learning it. It's after there has been a domestic violence situation, and they end up in the courts, and they end up in a group that I facilitate weekly, a batterers intervention program for 24 weeks. Mm-hmm. And the very first time that they're able to understand that there's another way than violence, there's another way to express yourself, and never ever thought about feel what feelings, you know, because they've been in that man box, if you will. I don't know if you are familiar with Tony Porter. He's a gentleman out of New York. He has a TED Talk, and he talks about the man box and how men are socialized, you know, that they're supposed, men don't cry, you know, they're the providers, and they have to, if someone messes with their family, they got to go kill everybody, you know. So it's a really good TED Talk. He goes into the man box, but I think the only time is when there's a situation where now they're in the system, the court system.
And you know, that's an unfair situation in the sense that it's easy, with quotations, it's easy to do that because it's high stakes, right? Whether it's the class you're teaching for the 24 weeks, whether it's prison, jail, probation, because it's high stakes. The true test of that growth is when you are free and clear, and you don't have to go back to a probation office, and you don't have to come to your class. When a person in your life is attempting to have conversation with you that is different than what you want to hear, that shutdown is so synonymous with learning violence as a child, because you're really saying to me, to avoid me being hurtful to you, and not hurtful in the sense of maybe speaking out of turn, but to avoid me lashing at you, and to avoid my first instinct, which could be to strike you, I'm just simply going to ignore you. That's not solving our issue, right?
Not
and that's because it's what we've been taught for so long, and we don't view that as violence, and it is, because I'm saying to you, I'm comfortable continuing to hurt you by not ever hearing you, just so that I don't have to sit in the fact that I really was never taught how to communicate.
Right.
It's really got to be understood. Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's really got to be understood how powerful this is. I can't even explain how many Black men that I've known and deal with and come in contact with on a regular basis that could not articulate how they felt emotionally. It was not. It wasn't even on the table
Not at all.
as an option. And as far as understanding that man box, I get the man box.
Mm-hmm.
I have to sit around on a regular basis and look and ask these questions as to why the way we deal with each other as men is more like other parts of the animal kingdom
Yeah.
than humanity, and dealing with people and as such, as opposed to literally separating their humanity from their frame and being able to look at them as simply an object. That's what it is, and that is really is what we are trained to do. And it's not even so much just by our parents or family or things of that nature. When you step out your door, I remember stepping out the door in the neighborhood. That was it.
Yeah.
You're either going to be moving, or you're a mark, or you're a target, and it's going to be a problem. You're going to learn one way, or you're going to learn another way.
Yeah.
That could be your best friend stomping you out every single day until you get it. And that's your friend. That could be your cousin, that could be your brother. But that's what it is. And that's what the culture for us has become. So to understand a man, moving in the way he is or responding in the way he is, you have to think first about, what if you had no voice your entire life, your voice was cut off? And then you're asked these questions and all of these other things. You're supposed to know things that have never been brought to you, that you've never been exposed to, other than something that you see on TV or something else that you don't even think is real, because you don't have anything to quantify. You don't have anything in reality in front of you to be able to compare it to.
Thank you, Christopher. And I wanted to say earlier, Christopher, just appreciate your transparency and your candidness around your story, your lived story. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Anything that's going to help, our people need help more than anything else, more than handouts, more than a program or somebody Google or somebody want to say they support Black Lives Matter. We need somebody actually boots on the ground, supporting us, helping us, reaching out, being there for us and our kids. And right now, that's us. And that's who it should be first and foremost. I appreciate you.
I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Shay. Shay, if you could chime in on your thoughts about the topic.
Yes, I definitely wanted to. Well, my name is Shay. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Florida, and it's definitely a tough topic to talk about. But I definitely could relate to Christopher when he was talking about being spanked, and like, in order to survive, you just you have to learn that you have to either like this or you won't survive. So, I mean, I personally got to that point to where, like, beatings, like I didn't even, they didn't even hurt anymore. It was just like, this was just something that, was happening. And, I knew it was a punishment for something, but it just didn't, it didn't have that same effect anymore, because it just was, it felt again pointless. It felt like, you had to go into that survival mode in order to, get through it and not, not feel anything. So I think, again, that numbing of feelings, that can become mental, obviously, because physically, it starts with physical numbing, and then it turns into, mental, numbing, because you can't really not feel something if your mind, is still aware of what's going on. So it can turn into so many different things. And I definitely agree that there's so many other, things that can be done instead of, hey, why are you spanking? Then you're having this conversation about why you're doing it. Why not just have this conversation beforehand? Why does there have to be this physical reaction to, something that the child did wrong or a mistake that was made. I can't really like remember exactly what it was, but I saw like it was like a post on Facebook a couple weeks ago, and it was saying like if you think about all the things that like children were spanked for, and think about what the consequence would be as an adult, like you spilled some juice, or you dropped something on the floor, or you bumped into something. These little small things were so big as a child, but if you think about it, if you did that now, what would really happen? Like, what would the consequence really be? And it would not be a major consequence, that a lot of kids get because they spilled some milk, or you know, they didn't, get the answer right on some homework, or, just simple things. If you think about it, a lot of these things are very simple, and these kids are getting these harsh consequences for very simple things that can just be talked about and not add to the stress of what's already going on with that child. If they're dealing with something and they're having a consequence for something that they did wrong per se, you're just adding to it by this physical reaction. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you so much, Shay. And
No problem.
you are
Agreed.
definitely
I agree with that.
right about that. Like we don't get hit for those things, but the connection, I think people are missing the connection to what spanking does. Um, and I know we touched on it earlier when it came to domestic violence victims with Denise and Carla when they talked about that, but it is the reason why you endure things longer than you're supposed to. Like it's the reason why you're in that abusive relationship. It's the reason why you at that job for 15 years that you hate and can't get promoted. It's the
Mm.
reason why you're so fearful of judgment. It's the reason why, oh, you were molested by uncle or auntie so and so, and you wait till your parents are on their deathbed to finally tell them that this is what happened, because somehow when your parent spanks you and says, hey, I'm hitting you because I love you, something in the brain tells you that, okay, now adults are able to do whatever they did, whatever they want to do with me, and somehow, oh my goodness, I must have did something wrong, so I deserve it. So what's the purpose of me even speaking out? Because I deserve that pain because I did something wrong. Like when you confuse that for a child, like it's a wrap, and people just don't see how simply it connects to so much added trauma that you decide to endure in your life when that relationship is broken, when you're taught to fear your parents and not be able to go to them with certain things and certain situations. Like, I mean, I can't imagine how it must have been during the civil rights movement. Like I could not, because you sit there and you teaching your child to sit in, get dogs sicked on you, water hoses, white people spitting in your face, right? And then you come home and the shoes is not in the right place and you ready to knock their head off, right? All that anger from what you had to endure out there, you bringing it home because it has to go somewhere. It doesn't, people think they just get over stuff. No, it sits and it festers. It's in your DNA. Like it continues. The generational trauma continues. I don't know if you guys got a chance to watch them, but just a little spoiler, the mom seeing dead people and her situation, the trauma she went through. She got a daughter under her seeing dead people. The daughter ain't seen what the mom seen, but now she see dead people. And the baby is going through the same thing. So it's like they're carrying all of this trauma. So you have to wonder, when is enough enough? And instead of this jealousy that we have, oh, you guys couldn't survive old school parenting, why do you want your kids to survive you? Right? You should want them to thrive. You should want them to have better, because I'm not just including our ancestors that have already paid the price. Those of us in this conversation, of us who have endured any type of racism, any type of spanking or abuse, we have already paid the price. Like, it should stop. It should end. There's no reason unless you have that resentment, right? That resentment, because you can't do it back to the person who did it to you. So you take it out on somebody who cannot fight back. That's what you're doing, however you want to look at it. This whole, oh, there's a difference between hitting and spanking. You have to hit in order to spank. Period. Oh, I don't hit my children when I'm angry. You have to get angry in order to want to inflict pain on somebody else. You're not just smiling and hitting the child. You're not going to do that. It's not possible. So not only are you inflicting pain on that child, within your hand, your whole, everything that's wrong with your life is in that hand, to where you have lost patience and you get this release out of taking it out on something that can't fight back, because you felt in those moments that you couldn't fight back either. So that part, I feel like people are missing the direct links, and it's how we continue to not only, because actually racial trauma, what we're experiencing right now, y'all, it's not a PTSD thing. It's a right now thing. We still in it. We still going through it. Okay? So it's like you continue to oppress these kids in these houses, and it's just very, very frustrating. And I hope that we feel strong enough and convicted enough in our thoughts and with our experience as to why we decided to work with our community in the first place, that we continue this conversation no matter what. Like, I have an answer. I feel like some of y'all do too. Based off of that post that we seen on Facebook, we got an answer for every piece of backlash that we're gonna get. But I'm
I
prepared
know I do,
for it.
because I've had to tell people before, because a lot of people's excuse for that I've heard personally for them spanking or whooping their kids is, I'm trying to keep my kids from going to jail, from using drugs, from turning to the streets, from being a teen parent. And I know from within my own family, whoopings did not stop them from any of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. One thing I
Whoopings did
want.
not whoopings did not stop my older sister, my oldest nephew, and my younger brother from going to jail, from using drugs, or from being teen parents.
Oh,
So
they
I'm
say
like,
they
those
say you should
things
have
that,
whooped them more. When you say that, they be like, "Oh, you should
mm-hmm,
have hit them more."
because
Mm.
they're like those the things of those, they there was no more that they could have gotten. It was There wasn't no more that they could have gotten. And I'm like, for that to be the excuse of why you were doing it, to prevent them from going there, it didn't work. I'm like, so if it didn't work for you to stop them from that happening, it's not working. Like, obviously it didn't work, because if that was your excuse, oh, I'm trying to stop them from ending up in the jailhouse, or I don't want them to end up going to the streets and joining the gang and using drugs and bringing home no babies. It didn't work. So it's like, what makes you think doing it with the next child is going to work, or doing it with the child after that one is going to work? Because it didn't work with the one before, or the one before. Like, the excuses for people whooping, they're not holding up for these days. It's like, most of the time that the excuses for, oh, I whoop them because, so it's not working though. Whatever you saying you're whooping for, it's not getting the results that you are trying to say that you're doing it for. You're not getting the results that you're asking for.
Please subscribe and click the notification bell for part 2. This channel will produce content that is both podcast and on-screen style. So if you're interested and you enjoyed today's show, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. See you soon.